Me and Akira both had a severe sinus infection uh, that we thought was the vid for a while,
Mm.
but we're doing much better. I sense the smell is kind of off, but
It
we're
could have been. It could have been. Mm.
yes. So we would like to welcome you to
Sorry.
the. No, it's okay. It could have been. We'd like to welcome you to today's episode where we delve into one of the most chilling and complex figures in modern history, Jim Jones. Known as the charismatic yet deeply controversial leader of the People's Temple, Jones rose to prominence preaching message of equality, social justice, and spiritual salvation, but behind his captivating facade lay a darker reality, one that ultimately led to the heartbreaking tragedy in Jonestown, Guyana in 1978. In this episode, we'll explore Jones' rise, his methods of influence, and the harrowing events that shocked the world and forever etched his name in history. Together, we'll try to understand how idealism turned into manipulation and how one man's vision spiraled into devastation. Stay tuned as we uncover the story behind Jim Jones and the lesson it holds for us today. James Warren Jones was an American cult leader, preacher, and mass murderer who founded and led the People's Temple between 1955 and 1978. In what Jim Jones termed revolutionary suicide, he and the members of his life inner circle planned and orchestrated a mass murder suicide in his remote jungle commune at Jonestown, Guyana, on November 18, 1978. Jim Jones and the events that occurred at Jonestown have had a defining influence on society's perception of cults. Jim Jones was born on May 13, 1931, in the rural community of Creek, Indiana, to James Thurman Jones and Lynetta Putnam. Jim was of Irish and Welsh descent. He and his mother both claimed to also have some Cherokee ancestry, but there was no evidence of that. His father was a disabled World War One veteran who suffered from severe breathing difficulties due to injuries which he sustained in a chemical weapons attack. He tried to expand his income by occasionally working on neighborhood road repair projects because the military pension he earned due to his wounds was insufficient to support his family. His father's illness led to financial difficulties, which in turn resulted in intense marital problems between his parents. In 1934, during the Great Depression, the Jones family was evicted from their home for failure to make mortgage payments. Their relatives purchased a shack for them to live in at the nearby town of Lynn, Indiana. The the new home where Jim grew up lacked plumbing and electricity. In Lynn, the family attempted to earn an income through farming, but again met with failure when his father's health further deteriorated. The family often lacked adequate food and relied on financial support from extended family. Sometimes they resorted to foraging in the nearby forests and fields to supplement their diet. Multiple Jim Jones biographers, his mother had no natural maternal instincts and she frequently neglected her son. When Jim Jones started school, his extended family threatened to cut off the financial support unless his mother got a job, forcing her to work outside her home. Meanwhile, Jim Jones' father was hospitalized multiple times due to his illness. As a result, his parents were frequently absent during his childhood. Although aunts and uncles lived close by and gave him some supervision, Jim wandered the streets of town, sometimes naked. He was cared for by the female residents of Lynn, and they frequently gave him food, clothing, and gifts. The pastor wife of the Nazarene church developed a special attachment to Jim. She gave him a Bible and encouraged him to study it, teaching him to follow the holiness code of the Nazarene church. As Jim grew older, he attended services at most of the churches in Lynn, often going to multiple churches each week, and he was baptized in several of them. Jim developed a desire to become a preacher as a child, and he began to practice preaching in private. His mother claimed that she was disturbed when she caught him imitating the pastor of the local apostolic Pentecostal church, and she unsuccessfully attempted to prevent him from attending the church services. Jim Jones's neighbors reported that he was an unusual child who was obsessed with religion and death. You okay?
Mhm. Just coughing.
All right. He regularly visited a casket manufacturer in Lynn and held mock funerals for roadkill that he collected. A neighbor of the Jones family even stated that Jones killed a cat with a knife for one of these funerals. He claimed to have unique abilities, such as the capacity to fly. He once leapt off of a building's roof to demonstrate his abilities to others, but he fell and broke his arm. He persisted in saying that he had exceptional abilities despite the fall. Sometimes he would put other children into life threatening situations and tell them he was guided by the angel of death. He committed countless sacrilegious pranks in the churches he attended as a boy, according to claims he made in adult life. He claimed that he'd stolen the Pentecostal minister's Bible and had covered Acts 2 and 38 with cow manure. He stated he substituted a cup of his urine for the holy water once at a Catholic church. A Jim Jones biographer suggested that he developed his unusual interest because he found it difficult to make friends. His strange religious practices stood out to most of his neighbors. They reported that he misbehaved more seriously. He frequently stole candy from the merchants in town. His mother was required to pay for his thefts. Jim regularly used offensive profanity, commonly greeting his friends and neighbors by saying, "Good morning, you son of a bitch," or "Hello, you dirty bastard." His mother usually beat him with a leather belt to punish his misbehavior. Jim Jones developed an intense interest in social doctrine. He became a voracious reader who studied Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Karl Marx, and Mahatma Gandhi. He would tell his wife that Mao Zedong was his hero. He spent hours in the community library and he brought books home so he could read them in the evenings. He studied different political systems, however, he did not espouse any radical political views in his youth. But as World War II started, he developed an intense interest in the Nazi Party. He was fascinated by their pomp, their cohesion, and Hitler's total power. The members of his neighborhood found it disconcerting that he extolled Nazi Germany. Jim acted as a dictator over the other kids, ordering them to goose step together and beating those who disobeyed. A childhood friend recalled Jim shouting Heil Hitler and giving the Nazi salute to German prisoners of war who were traveling to a detention facility. Commenting on his childhood, Jones stated, "I was ready to kill by the end of the third grade. I mean, I was so aggressive and hostile, I was ready to kill. Nobody gave me love, any understanding." In those days was in those days a parent was supposed to go with a child to school functions. There was some kind of school performance, and everybody's parents was there but mine. I'm standing there alone. Always was alone. In high school, he continued to stand out from his peers. He went by the nickname Jimmy during his youth, and almost always carrying his Bible with him. Jim was a good student and he enjoyed debating with his teachers. He also had the habit of refusing to respond to anyone who spoke to him first and only engaged in conversation when he started them. In contrast to his peers, Jim was known to dress in his Sunday church clothes every day of the week. His religious views alienate him from other young people. He would constantly confront them for drinking beer, smoking, and dancing. He would even interrupt other young people's events and insist that they read the Bible with him. Jim Jones did not enjoy participating in sports because he detested losing, so he coached teams for younger children instead. He was disturbed by the treatment of the African Americans who were in attendance at a baseball game he attended in Richmond, Indiana. The events at these baseball games brought discrimination against African Americans to Jim's attention and influenced his strong aversion to racism. His father belonged to the Indiana branch of the Ku Klux Klan, which enjoyed considerable support in Indiana during the Great Depression. He described how he and his father had a disagreement about race and added that they had not spoken for many, many years as a result of his father forbidding one of Jim's black friends from entering his home. Jim's parents separated in 1945 and they eventually divorced. He moved to Richmond, Indiana with his mother, where he graduated from Richmond High School in December 1948 early with honors. Jim and his mother had lost the financial support of their relatives following the divorce. Jim started working as an orderly at Richmond Reed's Hospital. He was well regarded by the senior management, but staff members later recalled that he exhibited disturbing behavior towards some patients and co-workers. He began dating a nurse in training named Marceline May Baldwin while he was working at Reed Hospital. He moved to Bloomington, Indiana in November 1948, where he attended Indiana University, Bloomington, with the intention of becoming a doctor, but changed his mind shortly thereafter. During his time at university, he was impressed by a speech that Eleanor Roosevelt delivered about the plight of African Americans, and he began to espouse support for communism and other radical political views for the first time. Jim and Marceline continued their relationship while he attended college, and the couple married June 12, 1949. Their first home was in Bloomington, where Marceline worked in a nearby hospital while Jim attended college. Marceline was Methodist, and she and Jim immediately fell into arguments about church. Jim's strong opposition to the Methodist Church's racial segregationist practices was an early strain on their marriage, and throughout the duration of their relationship, he frequently emotionally and psychologically abused Marceline. He insisted on attending Bloomington's Full Gospel Tabernacle, but eventually compromised and began attending a local Methodist church on most Sunday mornings, despite attending churches every week. He privately pressed his wife to accept atheism. After attending Indiana University for 2 years, the couple relocated to Indianapolis in 1951. He took night classes at Butler University to continue his education, finally earning a degree in secondary education in 1961. Jim Jones began attending gatherings of the Communist Party USA in Indianapolis. Jim and his family faced harassment from government authorities for their affiliation with the Communist Party. He said he asked himself, "How can I demonstrate my Marxism?" The thought was infiltrating the church. In 1952, he announced to his wife and her family that he would become a Methodist minister, believing the church was ready to put real socialism into practice. He was surprised when a Methodist district superintendent helped him get a start in the church, even though he knew Jim to be a communist. The summer of 1952, Jim Jones was hired as a student pastor to the children at the Somerset Southside Methodist Church, where he launched a project to create a playground that would be open to children of all races. He continued to visit and speak at Pentecostal churches while serving as a Methodist student pastor. In 1954, Jim was dismissed from his position in the Methodist Church, apparently for stealing church funds, though he later claimed he left the church because its leaders forbade him from integrating African Americans into his congregation. Jim Jones visited a Pentecostal Latter Rain convention in Columbus, Indiana, where a woman prophesied that Jim was a prophet with a great ministry. Jim was surprised by the endorsement, but gladly accepted the call to preach and rose to the podium to deliver a message to the crowd. In 1955, they assigned a new pastor to the Laurel Street Tabernacle, who enforced their denominational ban on healing revivals. This led Jim to leave and establish Wings of Healing, a new church that would later be renamed People's Temple. Jones's new church attracted only 20 members who come with him from the Law Street Tabernacle and was not able to financially support his vision. At one point, he even sold pet monkeys to raise funds for his church. Jim saw a need for publicity and began sneaking away to popularize his ministry and recruit members. Jim began to closely associate it with the Independent Assemblies of God, or IAOG, an international group of churches that embraced the Latter Rain movement. The IAOG had few requirements for ordaining ministers, and they were also accepting of divine healing practice. In June 1955, Jones held his first joint meeting with William Branham, a healing evangelist and a Pentecostal leader in the global healing revival. In 1956, Jim was ordained as an IAOG minister by Joseph Matson Bowes, a leader in the Latter Rain movement and the IAOG. Jones quickly rose to prominence in the group and organized and hosted a healing convention to take place June 11th through the 15th of 1956 in Indianapolis's Cato Tabernacle. Needing a well-known figure to draw crowds, he arranged to share a pulpit again with William Branham. Many attendees believe Jones's performance indicated that he possessed a supernatural gift, and coupled with Branham's endorsement, it led to rapid growth of People's Temple. Jones was particularly effective at recruitment among the African American attendees at the conventions. According to a newspaper report, regular attendance at People's Temple swelled to 1,000 thanks to the publicity Branham provided to Jones and People's Temple. Following the convention, Jim renamed his church the People's Temple Christian Church Full Gospel to associate it with Full Gospel Pentecostalism. The name was later shortened to the People's Temple. He participated in a series of multi-state revival campaigns with William. Jim claimed to be a follower and a promoter of William's message. People's Temple hosted a second International Pentecostal Convention in 1957, which was again headlined by Branham. Through the conventions and with the support of Branham and Matson Bowes, Jones secured connections throughout the Latter Rain movement. As Jones gradually separated from Pentecostalism and the Latter Rain movement, he sought an organization that would be open to all of his beliefs. In 1960, People's Temple joined the Disciples of Christ denomination, whose headquarters was nearby in Indianapolis. Archie I. James assured Jones that the organization would tolerate his political beliefs, and Jones was finally ordained by the Disciples of Christ in 1964. Jones was ordained as a disciples minister at a time where the requirements for ordination varied greatly, and the disciples membership was open to any church. Both 1974 and 19 in both 1974 and 1977, the disciples' leadership received allegations of abuse at People's Temple. They conducted investigations at the time, but they found no evidence of wrongdoing. Disciples of Christ found People's Temple to be an exemplary Christian ministry, overcoming human differences and dedicated to human services. People's Temple contributed $1.1 million, which in modern time would equal to $4,697,803 to the denomination between 1966 and 1977.
Damn.
Jones and People's, I know, right? Jones and People's Temple remained part of the Disciples until the Jonestown massacre. In 1960, Indianapolis Mayor Charles Boswell appointed Jones director of the local Human Rights Commission. Jones ignored Boswell's advice to keep a low profile. However, he used the position to secure new outlets for his views on local radio and television programs. The mayor and other commissioners asked him to curtail his public actions, but he refused. Jones was widely cheered at a meeting of the NAACP and the Urban League when he encouraged his audience to be more militant, capping his speech with "Let my people go." During this time as commission director, Jones helped to racially integrate churches, restaurants, the telephone company, and the Indianapolis Police Department, a theater and an amusement park, and the Indiana University Health Methodist Hospital. When swastikas were painted on the homes of two black families, Jones walked through the neighborhood, comforted the local black community, and counseled with white families not to move. Jones set up sting operations in order to catch restaurants which refused to serve black customers, and wrote to American Nazi party leaders and passed their responses to the media. In 1961, Jones suffered a collapse and was hospitalized. The hospital accidentally placed Jones in his black ward, and he refused to be moved. He began to make the beds and empty the bedpans of black patients. Political pressures which resulted from Jones' actions caused hospital officials to desegregate the wards. In Indiana, Jones was criticized for his integrationist views. The People's Temple became a target of white supremacists. Among several incidents, a swastika was placed on the temple, a stick of dynamite was left in a temple coal pile, and a dead cat was thrown at Jones's house after a threatening phone call. Nevertheless, the publicity which was generated by Jones' activities attracted a larger congregation. By the end of 1961, Indianapolis was far more racially integrated city, and Jim Jones was almost entirely responsible for it. In 1961, Jones warned his congregation that he had received a vision of a nuclear attack that would devastate Indianapolis. His wife confided to her friends that he was becoming increasingly paranoid and fearful. Like other followers of William Branham, who moved to South America during the 1960s, Jones may have been influenced by Branham's 1961 prophecy concerning the destruction of the United States in a nuclear war. Jones began to look for a way to escape the destruction he believed was imminent. In January 1962, he read an Esquire magazine article that purported South America to be the safest place to reside to escape any impending nuclear war. Jones decided to travel to South America to scout for a site to relocate People's Temple. Jones made a stop in Georgetown, Guyana. On his way to Brazil, Jones held a revival meetings in Guyana, which was a British colony. Continuing to Brazil, Jones's family rented a modest three-bedroom home in Belo Horizonte. Jones studied the local economy and the receptiveness of racial minorities to his message, but found language to be a barrier. Careful not to portray himself as a communist, he spoke of apostolic, apostolic communal lifestyle rather than Marxism. The family moved to Rio de Janeiro in mid 1963, where they worked with the poor in the favelas. Unable to find a location he deemed suitable for People's Temple, Jones became plagued by guilt for abandoning the civil rights struggle in Indiana. During the year of his absence, the regular attendance at the People's Temple declined to fewer than 100. Jones demanded the People's Temple send all its revenue to him in South America to support his efforts, and the church went into debt to support his mission. In late 1963, Archie I. James sent a word that the temple was about to collapse and threatened to resign if Jones did not soon return. Jones reluctantly returned to Indiana. Jones arrived in December 1963 to find People's Temple bitterly divided. Financial issues and low attendance forced Jones to sell the People's Temple's church building and relocate to a smaller building nearby. To raise money, Jones briefly returned to the revival circuit, traveling and holding healing campaigns with the latter rain groups. Possibly to distract the People's Temple member from issues facing their group, he told his Indiana congregation that the world will be engulfed by nuclear war on July 15, 1967, leading to a new socialist Eden on Earth, and that the temple must move to Northern California for safety. During 1964, Jones made multiple trips to California to find a suitable location to relocate. In July 1965, his followers began moving to their new location in Redwood Valley, California, near the city of Ukiah. Russell Windberg, People's Temple assistant pastor, strongly resisted Jones's efforts to move the congregation and warned members that Jones was abandoning Christianity. Windberg took over leadership of the Indianapolis church when Jones departed. About 140 of Jones's most loyal followers made the move to California, while the rest remained behind with Windberg. In California, Jones took a job as a history and government teacher at an adult education school in Ukiah. Jones used his position to recruit for People's Temple, teaching his students the benefits of Marxism and lecturing on religion. Jones planted loyal members of People's Temple in the classes to help him with recruitment. Jones recruited 50 new members to the People's Temple in the first few months. In 1967, Jones's followers coaxed another 75 members of the Indianapolis congregation to move to California. In 1968, the People's Temple, California location was admitted to the Disciples of Christ. Jones began to use the denominational connection to promote People's Temple as a part of the 1.5 million member denomination. He played up famous members of the Disciples, including Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover, and misrepresented the nature of his position in the denomination. By 1969, Jones increased his membership in the People's Temple in California to 300. Jones began using illicit drugs after moving to California, which further heightened his paranoia. He increasingly used fear to control and manipulate his followers. Jones frequently warned his followers that there was an enemy seeking to destroy them. The identity of that enemy changed over time from the Ku Klux Klan to Nazi to redneck vigilantes and finally the American government. He frequently prophesied that fires, car accidents, and death or injury would come upon anyone unfaithful to him and his teachings. He constantly pressed his followers to be aggressive in promoting and fulfilling his beliefs. Jones established a planning commission made up of his lieutenants to direct the People's Temple's communal lifestyle. Jones, through the planning commission, began controlling all aspects of the lives of his followers. Members who joined People's Temple turned over all their assets to the church in exchange for free room and board. Members whose work outside of the temple turned over their income to be used for the benefit of the community. Jones directed groups of his followers to work on various projects for additional income and set up an agricultural operation in Redwood Valley to grow food. Large community outreach projects were organized, and temple members were bused to perform work and community service across the region. The first known cases of serious abuse in People's Temple arose in California as the Planning Commission carried out discipline against members who were not fulfilling Jones's visions or following the rules. Jones's control over the members of People's Temple extended to their sex lives and who could be married. Some members were coerced to get abortions. Jones began to require sexual favors from women of the church, and he raped several male members of his congregation. Members who rebelled against Jones's control were punished with reduced food ration, harsher work schedules, public ridicule and humiliations, and sometimes with physical violence. As temple members grew, Jones created an armed security group to ensure order among his followers and to guarantee his own personal safety. By the end of 1969, People's Temple was growing rapidly. Jones's message of economic socialism and racial equality, along with the integrated nature of People's Temple, proved attractive, especially to students and racial minorities. By 1970, the temple opened branches in several cities, including San Fernando, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, as Jones began shifting his focus to major cities across California because of limited expansion opportunities in Ukiah. He eventually moved the temple's headquarters to San Francisco, which was a major center for radical protests. By 1973, People's Temple reached 2,570 members with 36,000 subscribers to its fundraising newsletters. Jones grew the temple by purposely targeting other churches. In 1970, Jones and 150 of his followers took a trip to San Francisco's Missionary Baptist Church. Jones had a faith healing revival meeting wherein he impressed the crowd by claiming to heal a man of cancer. His followers later admitted to helping him stage the healing. At the end of the event, he began attacking and condemning Baptist teachings and encouraging the members to abandon their church and join him. The event was successful, and Jones recruited about 200 new members for People's Temple. In a less successful attempt in 1971, Jones and a large number of his followers visited a tomb and shrine erected for Father Divine shortly after his death. Jones confronted Divine's wife and claimed to be the reincarnation of Father Divine. At a banquet that evening, Jones's followers seized control of the event, and Jones addressed Divine's followers again, claiming that he was Father Divine's successor. Divine's wife rose up and accused Jones of being the devil in disguise and demanded he leave. Jones managed to recruit only 12 followers through the event. Jones became active in San Francisco politics and was able to gain contact with prominent and local state politicians. Thanks to their growing numbers, Jones and People's Temple played an instrumental role in George Moscone's election as mayor in 1975. Moscone subsequently appointed Jones as the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission. Jim Jones hosted local political figures at his San Francisco apartment for discussions. In September 1976, Assemblyman Willie Brown served as master of ceremonies at a large testimonial dinner for Jones, attended by Governor Jerry Brown and Lieutenant Governor Mervyn Molly. At that dinner, Willie Brown touted Jones as what you should see every day when you look in the mirror, and said he was a combination of Martin Luther King Jr., Angela Davis, Albert Einstein, and Mao. Harvey Milk spoke to the audience during the political rallies held at Temple, and he wrote to Jones after one such visit. Reverend Jim, it may take me many a day to come back from that high that I reached today. I found something dear today. I found a sense of being that makes up for all the hours and energy placed in a fight. I found what you wanted me to find. I shall be back, for I can never leave. Through his connections with California politicians, Jim Jones was able to establish contacts with key national political figures. Jones and Moscone met privately with Vice Presidential candidate Walter Mondale on his campaign plane days before the 1976 election, leading Mondale to publicly praise the temple. First Lady Rosalind Carter met with Jones on multiple occasions, corresponded with him about Cuba, and spoke with him at a grand opening of the San Francisco headquarters, where he received louder applause than she did. Jones forged alliances with key columnists and others at the San Francisco Chronicle and other press outlets that gave Jones favorable press during his early years in California. In 1973, Ross Case, a former follower of Jones, began working with a group in Ukiah to investigate People's Temple. They uncovered a stage healing, the abusive treatment of a woman in the church, excuse me, and evidence that Jones raped a male member of his congregation. Reports of Case's activity reached Jones, who became increasingly paranoid that the authorities were after him. Case reported his findings to the local police, but they took no action. Shortly after, 8 members of the police temple made accusations of abuse against the Planning Commission and People's Temple staff members. They accused members of Planning Commission of being homosexuals and questioned their true commitment to socialism before leaving People's Temple. Jones became convinced he was losing control and needed to relocate People's Temple to escape the mounting threats and allegations. December 13, 1973, Jones was arrested and charged with lewd conduct for allegedly masturbating in the presence of a male undercover LAPD vice officer in a movie theater restroom near Los Angeles MacArthur Park. On December 20th, 1973, the charge against Jones was dismissed. Though the details of the dismissal are not clear, the court file was sealed and the judge ordered those records of the arrest to be destroyed. In the fall of 1973, Jones and the Planning Commission devised a plan to escape from the United States in the event of a government raid, and they began to develop longer-term plan to relocate the People's Temple. The group decided on Guyana as a favorable location, citing that its recent revolution, socialist government, and the favorable reaction Jones received when he traveled there in 1963. In October, the group voted unanimously to set up an agricultural commune in Guyana. In December, Jones and James traveled to Guyana to find a suitable location. In a newspaper interview, Jim Jones indicated that he would rather settle his commune in a communist country like China or the Soviet Union and was saddened about his inability to do so. Jones described Lenin and Stalin as his heroes and saw the Soviet Union as an ideal society. By the summer of 1974, land and supplies were purchased in Guyana. Jones was put in charge of the project and oversaw the installation of a power generation station, clearance of fields for farming, and the constructions of dormitories to prepare for the first settlers. In December 1974, the first group arrived to Guyana to start operating a commune that would become known as Jonestown. Jones left James to oversee Jonestown while he returned to the United States to continue his efforts to combat the negative press. He was largely unsuccessful, and more stories of abuse in People's Temple were leaked to the public. In March 1977, Marshall Kilduff published a story in New West magazine exposing abuses at the People's Temple. The article included allegations by temple deflectors of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The article convinced Jones that it was time to permanently relocate to South America, and he began to compel members of the People's Temple to make the move with him. Jones promoted the commune as a means to create both a socialist paradise and a sanctuary from media scrutiny in San Francisco. Jones purported to establish it as a model communist community, adding the temple compromise the purest communists there are. Once they arrived in Jonestown, Jones prevented members from leaving the settlement. Jonestown had about 50 settlers at the start of 1977 who were expanding the commune, but it was not ready to handle a large influx of settlers. Bureaucratic requirements after Jones' arrival sapped labor resources for other needs. Buildings fell into despair and weeds encroached on fields. James warned Jones that the facilities would support 200 people, but Jones believed the need to relocate was urgent and determined to move immediately. In May 1977, Jones and about 600 of his followers arrived to Jonestown. About 400 more followed in the subsequent months. Jones began moving the temple financial assets overseas and started to sell off property in the United States. The people had over $10 million, which would equate to $42,707,304 in modern time in assets. Despite the negative press of his prior to his departure, Jones was still well respected outside of People's Temple for setting up a racially integrated church which helped the disadvantaged. 68% of Jonestown residents were black. For the first several months, Temple members worked 6 days a week from approximately 6:30 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. with an hour for lunch. The work week was shortened to 8 hours a day for 5 days a week in the middle of 1978 after Jones's health started to fail and his wife started taking on more of the management of Jonestown activities. After the day's work ended, Temple members would attend several hours of activities in a pavilion, including classes in socialism. Jones compared this schedule to the North Korean system of 8 hours of daily work followed by 8 hours of study. This also comported with the temple's practice of gradually subjecting its followers to sophisticated mind control and behavior modification techniques borrowed from Kim Il Sung's Korea and Mao Zedong's China. Jones will often read news and commentary, including items from Radio Moscow and Radio Havana, and was known to side with the Soviets over Chinese during the Sino-Soviet split. Jones' news readings usually portray the U.S. as a capitalist and imperialist villain, while casting socialist leaders such as Kim Il sung, Robert Mugabe, and Joseph Stalin in a positive light. Recordings of commune meetings show how livid and frustrated Jones would get when anyone did not understand or find interesting the message Jones was placing upon them. Jones forced every member of the People's Temple to say they were homosexual while proclaiming himself to be only heterosexual. In spite of this, Jones was actually bisexual, having sex with both male and female followers in Jonestown. Women who slept with him claimed he was the best lover they ever had. People's Temple member Tim Carter felt Jones put them on to that kind of talk. Jones' paranoia increased in Jonestown, and as he became fearful of a government raid on the commune. Concerned of the community would not be able to resist an attack, he began holding drills to test their readiness. He called these drills white nights. Jones would call alert, alert, alert over the community loudspeaker to call the community together in the central pavilion. Armed guards with guns and crossbows surrounded the pavilion. The community members will remain at the pavilion throughout the drill, in which Jones told them their community had been surrounded by agents who were about to destroy them. Jones led them in prayers, chanting, and singing to ward off the impending attack. Sometimes he would have his guards hide in the forest and shoot their firearms to simulate an attack. Jones' terrified followers were only told they were participating in a drill when the event was over. One drill in September 1977 lasted for 6 days, known as the Six-Day Siege. This ordeal was used thereafter by Jones as a symbol for the community's indomitable spirit. The drills served to keep the members of Jonestown fearful of venturing outside of the commune. Following 2 visits by the United States Embassy personnel to check on the situation at Jonestown and an IRS investigation early in 1978, Jones became increasingly convinced that the attack he feared was imminent. In one 1978 White Night drill, Jones told his followers he was going to distribute poison for everyone to drink in an act of suicide. A batch of fruit punch was served to everyone in the pavilion, who sat by weeping and waiting for their death. After some time passed, Jones informed his followers that it was only a drill and there was not any poison in their drink. Through the white nights, Jones convinced his followers that the CIA was actively working to destroy their community and condition them to accept suicide as a means of escape. On at least two occasions during white nights after a revolutionary suicide vote was reached, simulated mass suicide was rehearsed. Temple defector Deborah Layton described the event in an affidavit. Everyone, including children, was told to line up. He passed through the line. We were given a small glass of red liquid to drink. We were told that the liquid contained poison and that we would die within 45 minutes. We all did as we were told. When the time came, we should have dropped dead. Reverend Jones explained that the poison was not real and that we had just been through a loyalty test. He warned us that the time was not far off. The situation of Jonestown in 1978 was deteriorating. The community was exhausted and overworked. Most were required to perform manual labor from early morning until evening. Loudspeakers were installed around Jonestown, and sermons were played on constant loop for the entire community to listen. Jones began to propagate his belief in what he termed translation. Once his followers settled in Jonestown, claiming that he and his followers would all die and live blissfully together in the afterlife, meals were meager and workers were often hungry. After spending all day working, the community gathered each evening at the central pavilion to listen to Jones preach. His sermons generally lasted for several hours. Most of the community was sleep deprived. According to Terry Buford O'Shea, one of the few escapees from Jonestown, sleep deprivation was one of the most effective methods of controlling Jones's followers. O'Shea said, "One time Jim said to me, let's keep them poor and tired. Because if they're poor, they can't escape, and if they're tired, they can't make plans." O'Shea also reported that they can't escape, and if they're O'Shea reported that Jones would maintain control in his people's temple members using punishments such as keeping them in a coffin-shaped box several feet underground, while other members were assigned to constantly berate and reprimand them for their perceived slights against the cult. The majority of the community members were minors or the elderly, and few people were of working age found it difficult to keep up with the workload required to support the community. Health care, education, and food rations were all in limited supply, and the situation was worsening. Jones's orders was increasingly erratic. He was seen staggering and urinating in public, but this was due to prostatitis for a short time towards the end of the Jonestown in late 1978. Not the entirety of Jonestown. He found it difficult to walk without assistance around this time, but it cleared up by Ryan's visit. In November 1978, Congressman Ryan led a fact-finding mission to Jonestown to investigate allegations of human rights abuses. His delegation included relatives of the temple members, an NBC camera crew, reporters for several newspapers. The group arrived in the Guyanese capital of Georgetown on November 15th. 2 days later, they traveled by airplane to Port Katuma, then were transported to Jonestown. Jones hosted a reception for the delegation that evening at the Central Pavilion in Jonestown, during which Temple member Vernon Gosney passed a note meant for Ryan to NBC reporter Don Harris, requesting assistance for himself and another Temple member, Monica Bagby, in leaving the settlement. Tensions began to rise as news spread through the community that some members were attempting to leave. Ryan's delegation left hurriedly the afternoon of November 18th after Ryan narrowly avoided being stabbed by Temple member Don Sly. Ryan and his delegation managed to take along 15 Temple members who expressed a desire to leave, and Jones made no attempt to prevent their departure. Marceline Jones announced on a public address system that everything was fine, and the urged locals to go back to their houses after Ryan left Jonestown for Port Katuma. During this time, aides preparing a large metal tub of grape flavor aid poisoned with diphenhydramine, promethazine, chlorpromazine, chloroquine, chlorhydrate, diazepam, and cyanide. As members of Ryan's delegation boarded two planes at the Port Katuma airstrip, Jones' Red Brigade of armed guards arrived and began shooting at them. The gunmen killed Ryan and four other people near an Guyana Airways twin otter aircraft. At the same time, one of the supposed defectors, Larry Layton, drew a weapon and began firing on members of the party inside the other plane. A Cessna, which included Gosney and Bagby. NBC cameraman Bob Brown was able to capture the footage of the first few seconds of the shooting at the altar, just before he himself was killed by the gunmen. The five killed at the airstrip was Ryan, Harris, Brown, San Francisco Examiner photographer Greg Robinson, and Temple member Patricia Parks. Surviving the attack were future Congresswoman Jackie Spear, a Ryan staff member, Richard Dreyer, Deputy Chief of Mission from the U.S. Embassy in Georgetown, Bob Flick, an NBC producer, Steve Sung, an NBC sound engineer, Tim Reiterman, an Examiner reporter, Ron Javers, a Chronicle reporter, Charles Cross, a Washington Post reporter, and several deflecting Temple members. They escaped into the jungle to avoid being killed. Later that same day, November 18, 1978, Jones received word that his security guards failed to kill all of Ryan's party. Jones concluded the escapees will soon inform the United States of the attack, and they will send the military to seize Jonestown. Jones called the entire community to the Central Pavilion. He informed the community that Ryan was dead, and it was only a matter of time before the military commandos descended on their commune and killed them all. Jones told Temple members that the Soviet Union would not give them passage after the airstrip shootings. Jones said, "We can check with Russia to see if they'll take us immediately. Otherwise, we die." Asking, "You think Russia's going to want us with this stigma?" With the reasoning, Jones and several members argued the group should commit revolutionary suicide. Jones recorded the entire death ritual on audio tape. One Temple member, Christine Miller, dissented towards the beginning of the tape. Cries and screams of children and adults were also easily heard on the tape recording made. The temple had received monthly half-a-pound shipments of cyanide since 1976 after Jones obtained a jeweler's license to buy the chemical, purportedly to clean gold. In May 1978, a temple doctor wrote a memo to Jones asking permission to test cyanide on Jonestown pigs, as their metabolism was close to that of human beings. A drink mixture of flavor aid and cyanide was handed out to the members of the community to drink. Those who refused to drink were injected with cyanide via syringe. The crowd was also surrounded by armed guards, offering members the basic dilemma of death by poison or death by guard's hand. The mass murder suicide resulted in the deaths of 909 inhabitants of Jonestown. 276 of them were children, mostly in and around the Central Pavilion, along with the deaths of an additional four members
Mm.
residing in Georgetown. This resulted in the greatest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act with the attacks of September 11, 2001 in New York and Washington. The FBI later recovered the 45-minute audio tape of the mass poisoning in progress. The recording became known as the death tape. What you think, my friend?
That was a very fucked up man,
Yes, I agree.
and I cannot fathom that it was because his mother and father did not love him enough.
No,
I think he was just crazy.
yeah, I agree.
I think he was just verifiably insane.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. All right, do you have any questions, comments about this episode?
I only have one question. Are you thirsty?
Very much so.
That's all. That's all.
All right,
But it
we
was
go.
a very informative episode, even though I've watched several documents about it. Ow! Kirka. Okay, come on.
Okay. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget to touch grass, play some video games, spend time with
Hope
your
you
loved
have a.
ones.
Mm-hmm. If you celebrate Easter, have a happy Easter.
Happy Easter to all that
If you
celebrate.
don't, just have a happy day.
That too. If you like what you heard, please consider liking and following and turning on your notifications so you'll be notified when we go live. For our YouTube viewers, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting on the videos. And make sure you turn on your notifications on YouTube so that you'll be notified when we go live or when I post a video. Until then, this concludes the Two Geeks One Mind podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Geeky Kel,
I am your other host, Akira.
and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Later.